You've poured your heart into a story of a woman's journey, her relationships, her career, her personal growth. You've crafted what you think is a powerful story full of emotion and meaning. Then your beta readers, your critique partners, give you some feedback and it says, I just couldn't connect with her. It felt like the plot just happened. She's boring. So what went wrong? So here's the thing. Writing a compelling women's fiction novel is not about the plot. It's about creating this central character that feels deeply and is authentically human. The trap that many women's fiction authors fall into is that they think that if they create this sympathetic situation, that the readers are going to connect with that. And they're automatically going to root for your heroine. But readers don't connect to a situation. What they're connecting to is a person going through a situation. So leaning on a plot too hard without developing your character is a big mistake that creates a shallow story. So in this video, I'm going to break down the 5 biggest mistakes that new writers make when they're trying to write women's fiction novels. And I'm going to go beyond the surface level conflicts that people usually talk about when they talk about the problems with women's fiction and look at what truly makes a character come alive and leap off the page and grabs the reader and makes them refuse to ever close your book.
You have a story to tell, but you don't know where to start. Let me show you how to free your story. I teach you how to write and how to dig deep in your soul to release your story and make a difference in the world.
Welcome to the Julia Amante channel. If we're just meeting, I am Julia Amante. I'm a women's fiction author. So I love talking about women's fiction. And my hope is that my tips are helping you to write a better story. So let's get started with the first mistake that new writers make, and that is creating a passive protagonist. This is the kind of character where things happen to the character and not the character making things happen. You don't want a character that is just reacting to the things that are happening to her. So a quick way to diagnose this is with the sexy lamp test. Have you ever heard of this? Okay, so this is just if you can replace your protagonist with a sexy lamp, then you don't need her. You're doing something wrong, right? So for example, does she just exist as the prize for the hero? A person that's going to be rescued, or is she just a sounding board for another character? So in other words, what you don't want is you don't want her to be a prop, right? She has to be the protagonist that is really driving her own story. She has a goal. She's chasing the goal. She is solving her own problems. She is driving the story. So think of Katniss Evergreen, right? In the Hunger Games. She is the one that volunteers to go into the Hunger Games to save her sister. She's the one that throws the arrow at the game maker. She's the one that befriends Rue, right? She is doing everything. So she's taking control of this world that she doesn't have a choice about going, but she kind of does. She volunteers, right? And she takes control immediately. So to fix the problem of the passive protagonist, if you have that, is make sure that you know what her goal is and make sure that she is taking the steps to reach her goal. What's going to matter are the choices that she makes in your plot. The second mistake is the invincible female character. So the one that seems so perfect that she, can dodge bullets, she never gets hurt, she's basically a superhero. So she's not real, she's not realistic. And for women's fiction, we want a real person. We don't want a superwoman, right? That's not why we're reading it, because what we want to do as readers is be able to relate to her. And we can't relate to a superhuman female character. We can relate to real people. And what does this mean? It means that she has fears, she has insecurities, she has moments of despair, just like real humans do. So it's not the absence of weakness that we love about the female character, it's actually how she deals with her weaknesses. So remember that a character that can't be hurt is a character that is really not brave. And if you make her into the superhero, what you're doing is you're really losing the connection between the heroine and the reader. If you look at someone like Sarah Connor from The Terminator, the first one, she is vulnerable, she's frightened, and then she acts in spite of being afraid, in spite of somebody chasing her and her thinking that she's not going to make it. She actually does this throughout the whole, all the Terminators. Or you look at Ellen Ripley in Alien. Again, she was vulnerable, she was frightened, but she acted. She's the one that took action. And they weren't perfect. Neither one of these characters were perfect. They had weaknesses, but it was how they overcame the weaknesses that made us love them. So to fix this problem, if you have a Superwoman character, what you want to do is figure out what her biggest fear is. And it can't be like a spider, okay? It has to be something deep, something that she's afraid of. So an emotional fear. I'm reading a story right now about a woman that was abused by her first boyfriend, and she's very fearful about getting involved in a second relationship because for obvious reasons, right? She's afraid that it's going to end up the same because it's the same type of character. So the first male character who was abusive was an athlete, and now she's involved with another athlete, and she's afraid that the same things are going to happen, even though she knows it's not the same person. But deep inside, there's this fear, and yet she still moves forward. She moves forward with the relationship. She faces the first guy, the abuser. So we have a lot of respect for her, and we can understand her and we can feel for her because we've all been involved in something, not the same as that, but we've all feared something. So take your heroine and figure out what her biggest fear is and then make her face that. Okay, the third mistake is creating a fake flaw for your heroine. So we are all told, right, that your characters have to have flaws. And so you create a fake flaw, a flaw that really isn't a flaw. So for example, she's a perfectionist. And I tell my college students this too all the time when they're writing their cover letters or their resumes, or they're thinking about their interview questions. Somebody asks you, what are your strengths and what are your weaknesses? And they're like, well, my weakness is I'm a perfectionist. Well, no, that's really not a weakness. And you know it's not a weakness. So don't do that to your characters either. Don't give them a flaw that's really not a flaw. So you can make your character arrogant. You can make it that she is too proud or she underestimates her enemies. Her flaw, in other words, needs to get her into trouble. So something that is her flaw is going to cause her to not get her goal that she needs to get, or to put obstacles between her and her goal. It's going to make it harder for her. So you need a real flaw. So think about Scrooge in the Christmas Carol, for example. Now, obviously not a female, but a character who has many flaws. And one of his biggest flaws is that he's greedy, right? He thinks that money is going to bring him happiness. And so this is the flaw that he has to overcome, right? So he has to realize that it's not money that brings happiness, but it's actually giving money away, right? It's sharing things. By the end of the movie or the book or the story, he is giving his money away, and he realizes that that's really what makes him happy. Or you look at Pride and Prejudice, it's in the title. What is her flaw? It's her pride. It leads her to snap judgments about Mr. Darcy, and it creates the prejudice that she has against him. And in order for her to be happy, she has to overcome this flaw. So if you have a perfect heroine, or you have one that doesn't really have a real flaw, then your job is to give this character a real flaw and then make her overcome this flaw, and she can't reach her goal. She can't be happy unless she overcomes this flaw. Okay, I hope you're finding this helpful. If you are, then please like the video and subscribe to the channel so you can be notified next week when my new video goes up. So let's talk about mistake number 4, and this is creating the badass heroine. Problem with the badass heroine is typically she tends to be very one-dimensional. She's tough, and everything about her is tough, right? And so that she has no other emotion. She has no other vulnerabilities like we talked about, or no flaws that we can attach ourselves to. Real people are messy, and we may be tough. There are a lot of very tough women out there, but they also have some moments where they doubt themselves. They also have some moments where they need to talk to someone, right? It's not always tough. And a lot of times I think it's a reaction to the damsel in distress, a stereotype that we tend to have, or we don't want that. It's like, I don't want my heroine to be wimpy. I don't want my heroine to be saved by someone else. So I'm going to make her so tough and so strong that she's going to be the complete opposite of that. But then you also are going to fall into she's not going to be likable. She's not going to be relatable. And so you want to give her some humanity. Maybe she's very tough, but maybe she cries at romantic movies, or maybe she is very, very tough in the boardroom at work, but when she goes home, she's very loyal and she's very kind to friends. So think of Amy Dunn from Gone Girl. She's brilliant. She's definitely very tough. She's meticulous and creative, but she's also narcissistic, vengeful, and terrifyingly manipulative. She can have that very perfect, cool girl face, while internally she's seething with rage. She's a fascinating character because she's so complex. All these conflicting traits that she has actually makes her more captivating to the reader. So if you have the one-dimensional character, so I use toughness as an example. It doesn't have to be just the tough character. It could be just any character that is one-dimensional. If your character isn't complex, doesn't have different pet peeves, doesn't have things, and that's what you need to do. This is your, the action that you can take to fix this, is give her more than just that one trait. If she's tough, then where is she not tough? If she's very competent, where is she not competent? If she's very arrogant, that could be her flaw, right? But it could also be her personality, and we don't want it to be just that. So maybe there's something shameful in her background that she doesn't want anybody to know. So again, you want to give her something that makes her more relatable to the reader. And the last and the fifth mistake is forgetting that she's human, right? So you spend so much time with what she needs to get done in the plot, in the story, focusing on her as a character in the plot, that you forget to make her a human being. So a common mistake is just, giving us all the features. This is what she looks like. This is how tall she is. She's 5'7". She has black hair. She has blue eyes, right? So we give all the details about her, and we're creating this character, but we're not making her come alive. We don't really want to know what she looks like as much as we want to know who she is. So we want to know the small everyday things about her. What does she think about when she's washing her dishes? What is her world view? We want to see her internal thoughts. How does she want to control her world to stay safe? Because characters, that's one of the things they do, right? That's one of the things we do. How do we want to control the world so that we stay safe? Does she have to have a super neat house? Does she have to have a special connection with friends? So one of the things you can do to make a more human character is to think about the character as a human, right? So maybe sit down and write a journal entry as if you were that character. Write about a day in the life. What did you do today? What did you think today? Again, writing as that character. What came to mind? What did you notice? What did you have for breakfast? What were the rituals that you had that day? If someone asked you that about you, you would be able to tell people that. So write it as if you are that character and tell us a day in the life, what happened to that character. So if you're noticing that women's fiction is different from other fiction, if you're saying it's not so much plot driven as it is character driven, then you're absolutely right, and you're getting the idea of what women's fiction is. Readers read women's fiction for a connection to the character. Yes, they love the plot. Yes, they want to see what's going on with this character, but they really want that deep connection to a complex character. And if you really want your story to land with the readers, then that's what you need to focus on. More than the plot, you need to focus on the character herself and the development of this character. So to recap, the mistakes that you want to avoid are: first, don't write a passive protagonist. Give her agency over and drive over her own story. Second, avoid the invincible character. So embrace the vulnerability and create true strength. Third, skip the fake flaws. Define authentic flaws to create meaningful internal conflict. Fourth, go beyond the one-dimensional badass character and build a multi-layer, specific personality for your character. And then lastly, don't forget that to make her human. Okay, write the human first and the character second. Don't think of her as a character, think of her as an actual person. So building a character this way is a challenge, because as storytellers, we do think first of our story. We're creating a story and we're populating it with characters. And with women's fiction, you almost have to start with the character and say, okay, who is this character? And what does this character want? And how do I give this character what she wants, but put a bunch of obstacles in the way? And your story starts to build really from the character, rather than creating a story and then dropping the characters in there. And if you do your work right, what you're going to have is not just a character, but you're going to have a real person that is going to live in the reader's mind long after they close your book. So I'd love to hear from you. Which one of these mistakes can you relate to most? Which one do you have a hard time with? Which one of these do you or have you seen in actual books that you've read where you think, wait, this is a flaw that the author didn't deal with? So leave me a comment. I do read the comments. Sometimes it takes me a few days because I am a very busy. Not only am I a writer and I make these videos, but I'm also a college professor, so I am gone a lot, but I do check the comments and I do respond to them. So I'd love to hear from you. And I'd also love it if you gave this video a like and if you shared it with friends, and if you subscribe to the channel. So I'm asking for a bunch of stuff, but I do appreciate all of it. Thank you very much.